Lee Marvin was born on February 19th, 1924 in New York City into a household that blended privilege with instability. His father worked in advertising and had served in World War I, while his mother came from a long-established Southern family. On paper, it looked like a solid upbringing, but Marvin's youth was marked by rebellion and restlessness. He struggled with authority, bounced between schools, and earned a reputation as a troublemaker long before anyone imagined him as a Hollywood icon. That early defiance wasn't polished or performative. It was raw, unshaped energy. Marvin never fit neatly into expectations, and that refusal to conform would later become central to his screen presence. Even as a teenager, he seemed uncomfortable with pretense and resistant to artificial rules. Those who knew him early often recalled a young man who felt out of place, searching for something real to anchor himself. That search would eventually lead him far from classrooms and conventions into experiences that would permanently define the man he became. War and the making of authenticity. World War II changed Lee Marvin in ways no acting class ever could. He enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps and served in the Pacific Theater, where he experienced combat at its most brutal. During the Battle of Saipan, Marvin was seriously wounded, an injury that would leave lasting physical and emotional scars. The war stripped away illusions and replaced them with a clear-eyed understanding of fear, loss, and survival. Marvin rarely romanticized his service. Instead, he carried it quietly, letting it inform how he moved through the world. The realism audiences later sensed in his performances didn't come from method acting. It came from a lived experience. He had seen life reduced to its essentials, and that knowledge stayed with him. Awarded the Purple Heart, Marvin returned home altered, tougher, but also more introspective. War didn't make him famous, but it gave him something far rarer: credibility. From that point forward, his toughness was never enacted. It was simply who he was. Finding his way to the screen. After the war, Marvin drifted for a time, uncertain of his future and uninterested in conventional paths. He worked ordinary jobs, including assisting a plumber, before discovering theater almost by accident. Acting offered him something he hadn't found elsewhere: a way to channel his intensity without disguising it. He began performing in regional theater in upstate New York, where his commanding voice and physical presence immediately stood out. Marvin didn't rely on polish or charm. He relied on honesty. That authenticity translated well to television and film, and by the early 1950s, he was steadily working in Hollywood. Early roles often cast him as villains, soldiers, or hardened men on the edge, parts that mirrored his own hard-earned worldview. Even in small roles, he brought a gravity that couldn't be ignored. Directors noticed that Marvin didn't perform toughness. He embodied it, slowly, almost inevitably. Supporting roles turned into opportunities that placed him directly in the spotlight, breaking through and breaking expectations. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Lee Marvin had become impossible to overlook. Films like The Big Heat and Bad Day at Black Rock showcased his ability to command attention without overplaying a moment. He could be terrifying, restrained, or unexpectedly vulnerable, often within the same scene. His career-defining moment arrived with Cat Ballou in 1965, where he surprised audiences by playing dual roles that leaned heavily into comedy. The performance revealed a side of Marvin few expected: self-aware, playful, and fearless in poking fun at his own image. Winning the Academy Award for Best Actor, he proved he was more than a tough guy stereotype. He was an actor with range, intelligence, and timing. The role didn't soften him, it deepened him. From that point on, Marvin wasn't just respected, he was trusted. Audiences believed him, no matter the genre, because he never pretended to be anything he wasn't, defining an era of American film. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Lee Marvin became one of the defining faces of American cinema. Films like The Dirty Dozen, Point Blank, and Hell in the Pacific cemented his reputation as a leading man who carried moral complexity rather than easy heroism. He worked closely with directors who valued restraint and realism, bringing depth to characters who might otherwise have been simple archetypes. Marvin's performances suggested history, lives lived before the story began. He played men shaped by regret, loyalty, and hard choices, often communicating more with silence than dialogue. Even in large ensemble casts, he anchored scenes with quiet authority. Unlike many stars of his era, Marvin showed little interest in glamour. He avoided celebrity excess and rarely tried to win affection. Instead, he earned respect by staying consistent with himself. That consistency is what made his work endure. He wasn't chasing trends, he was defining a standard. The man behind the roles off screen, Lee Marvin, was complex, private, and uncompromising. He valued honesty above social ease and had little patience for artificial behavior. While his blunt nature sometimes made relationships difficult, those close to him often spoke of his loyalty and sharp intelligence. Marvin enjoyed conversation, literature, and reflection far more than publicity suggested. He disliked Hollywood's obsession with image and resisted being molded into anything fashionable. Fame, to him, was a byproduct, not a goal. He could be difficult, but he was rarely dishonest. That integrity earned him quiet admiration among peers who understood how rare it was. Marvin didn't seek to be liked. He sought to be real. He carried himself with the same straightforwardness, whether he was on a set or at home. That refusal to separate the man from the persona is what made him compelling. What audiences saw on screen wasn't a character, it was a filtered version of truth. Lee Marvin and Cary Grant. When asked about Cary Grant, Lee Marvin offered observations that were thoughtful rather than dismissive. He admired Grant's intelligence and mastery of image, recognizing that Grant understood Hollywood in a way few ever had. Marvin noted that Grant's elegance was carefully constructed, a professional armor that protected a deeply private man. Where Marvin lived openly, Grant controlled what the world saw. To Marvin, this difference wasn't a flaw, it was a contrast. He respected Grant's discipline and acknowledged his extraordinary screen presence, even if he couldn't personally relate to that level of refinement. Marvin sensed that behind Grant's polish was a man who worked tirelessly to escape his past, and he found that struggle both impressive and quietly sad. He believed Grant carried more depth than his roles often allowed him to show. In Marvin's view, both men represented valid forms of masculinity, one built on control, the other on confrontation. Neither was fake. They were simply different truths. Later, years and quiet strength. As Marvin aged, his health gradually declined, shaped by years of physical strain and environmental exposure. In the mid-1980s, he suffered serious complications from valley fever, an illness that severely impacted his lungs and overall strength. Medical treatment was difficult and recovery was slow, leaving him visibly weaker than the imposing figure audiences remembered. Still, those close to him noted that his spirit remained largely unchanged. He faced illness with the same stoic resolve he had shown throughout his life, avoiding complaint and maintaining his dry sense of humor. Marvin spent much of his later time away from the spotlight, preferring privacy and reflection. His second wife, Pamela, remained a steady presence, offering support and stability during his most challenging years. And yet, though physically diminished, Marvin retained the clarity and independence that defined him. Even in decline, he remained unmistakably himself, a man who accepted reality without surrendering dignity, a legacy built on truth. Lee Marvin died on August 29, 1987, at the age of 63, marking the end of a distinct chapter in Hollywood history. He left behind a body of work defined not by spectacle, but by sincerity. Marvin represented a kind of masculinity rooted in experience rather than fantasy, a presence shaped by war, struggle, and self-awareness. He never chased perfection, and that refusal is what made him unforgettable. His reflections on peers like Cary Grant revealed a rare generosity, an understanding that there are many ways to be authentic. Marvin's legacy endures because it feels lived in, honest, and unfiltered. He didn't just play men who had seen the world, he was one. In an industry built on illusion, Lee Marvin stood apart by embracing imperfection. That commitment to truth, both on and off the screen, remains his greatest achievement and the reason his work still resonates decades after the final curtain fell.